I want to welcome everyone to today's Media Mentor session. I'm excited about this one because, we haven't had somebody with our guest host background before. And so that's what we're trying to do, is kind of go broader. And, yes, there's fabulous people in the kind of the normal places that we think about, but it's so much broader. So why not bring those voices and faces in? So I'm Dolly Wolf. I'm the founder of One Day Immersion. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our focus is really to make these connections with college students, recent grads, faculty members, and help you kind of find your way from university into the workplace, and listening to these diverse voices and opinions and insight, just kind of help you navigate your way. I had the pleasure of meeting our guest today last fall, when she so graciously agreed to host one of her very funny original shows at our conference. And I laughed after just the first few sentences. I laughed out loud, actually, just because the tone was funny. I saw my teenage self, way back in the day. And so I just wanted to know more about her. I wanted to know how she got here, what drives her, what she sees, in her future. And so I asked her to host a session with us today. Again, way back in my teenage days, but so relatable. So now today we're getting to have somebody talk to us who's just doing something that she loves, which I think is very cool. So Elise Morales, she is there. she's right there. She's a comedy writer and performer, and is currently the writer of the Betches Sup newsletter. These things just make me laugh. And co-host of the Betches Sup podcast. She's been a featured stand-up in MTVU's College Quickies in 2016. She was one of the winners of the NBC UCB Diversity Scholarship Showcase. And her series, Triffany Briffney, which I watched a few episodes of, and again, laughed out loud. You should check it out. Was an official comedy selection for 2016's New York TV Fest. Her original show, The Roast of Your Teenage Self, has toured across the country and was featured in the 2017 and 19 New York comedy festivals. Definitely check it out. It's so funny, and her guests are, going back to the teenage days. You will laugh, and you will see yourself in these conversations. Last year, it became its own podcast on the All Things Comedy Network. Alise has appeared in Hulu's Difficult People, Late Night with Seth Meyers, and The Chris Gethard Show, to name a few. So I want to get started, and I would love you to please welcome the very funny, thoughtful, smart, talented, insightful, focused, and charming Elise Morales.
Oh my gosh, Dolly, I'm going to cry. That was so nice.
It's all true.
Thank you. And I'm really, really excited to be here. I'm really excited to chat with you guys. I mean, it's truly hard to follow up that introduction, but for my chat today, I was just going to talk with you guys about, how I got into comedy, how that even became a thing in my life, and some lessons that I learned following my dream that I think you guys can apply to your lives, whether you're pursuing something in the entertainment industry or not. So, a couple of things I wanted to mention. Yes, I do have this podcast. It's called The Roast of Your Teenage Self. It is something that I've toured across the country. I also do a lot of voice acting. I'm currently the voice of a character on a new show that's out on Paramount Plus called Tuning Out the News, which is executive produced by Stephen Colbert. And I also do the voice of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on Showtime's Our Cartoon President. So I do a lot of different stuff, which I think is, we'll get into a little more, but part of the key to my incredible success. So Without further ado, I am actually going to share my screen. So like I said, this is actually the cover image for my podcast, The Roast of Your Teenage Self. And the podcast actually started as a live show where I would have comedians come on and roast their teenage selves with the help of a PowerPoint presentation full of pictures. So I decided what better way to kick off my session here than by introducing you to the woman who made all of this possible, or should I say girl, not yet a woman. She's kind of in between. This is 15-year-old Elise Morales. So, actually, like many teenagers today and like me today, I am rocking the middle part. So this is beyond the Gen Z millennial divide, if any of you have been following that. This is actually my high school yearbook photo. I have, as you can see, there's a zipper right here because what does a teenage boy want to see more than just the upper left-hand corner of the boob? We love it. So this is 15-year-old Elise, but I feel bad showing you guys this picture because if 15-year-old Elise could have put any photo in the yearbook, she probably would have put in this one. Right. So this gives you, I think, a little bit more of a picture of what we were dealing with here. This is a picture of me probably in the year 2003. I remember my boyfriend at the time, Brian Schmag, whose name I shouldn't have said, but he's a dentist. It's fine. He took this picture and it was on like my parents' giant digital camera that had the teeny tiny screen. And I remember him turning it around and showing it to me and me thinking like, oh my God, I nailed it. This is amazing. So anyway, this is 15-year-old Elise Morales. She was, as you can see, she was an emo kid, really into MySpace, really into her ska band, Sitting Walrus, really into Harry Potter. We'll talk more about that later. Really into the school plays, but no concept of like being an actor. Like that was, I loved doing the plays and I loved performing, but that was not something I was thinking about at that time. So the question remains, how did this person become this beautiful, stunning person next, whatever. Anyway, this is a really good picture of me. So I try to include it in any presentations that I do. So how did this person transform? What happened in between these two things? I'll move to the next slide. Okay. This brings me to the question that plagues life, right? What do I want to do with my life and how do I do it? I spent the majority of the past 10 years trying to answer this question. It got me from a moody teenager yelling at my mom and dad over nothing to comedian, voice actress, yelling at people over the internet who actually pay to hear what I have to think. So huge, huge upgrade. So here's kind of my journey with comedy. Things began in college, really, for me. If you guys want to hazard a guess, you can write it in the chat. Does anyone want to guess what I majored in? I'll give you a second to write it in the chat. You don't have to say out loud if you don't want to, but you also could say out loud. I think it's coming in the chat and I can't see. Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, great. I can't see the chat, so now this is a disaster. Okay, hold on. Theater. People are guessing theater. People are guessing English. That is all a very good guess. I actually majored in international relations and Spanish. So very, very, very different than what I ended up doing by almost all accounts. But I would never, I went to the University of Delaware. Go Blue Hens. I would never discount my college experience because it was in college that I made the fateful decision to join my college improv team. So these are the Rubber Chickens. I'm actually wearing my Rubber Chickens hoodie, which I love. It's still the most comfortable hoodie I've ever gotten in my life. I joined my college improv team mostly because it seemed like a fun thing to do. I had done all of the plays in high school. I tried doing a play through my college and I didn't really like it. A couple of the friends that I made had already joined this improv team. So my sophomore year, I joined just out of sheer need for something to do and because I thought they seemed cool. And I don't know, that spark, that something was drawing me to them that would eventually change the course of everything. So as an improv team, we did shows every month. We learned how to do short form improv, which is kind of like the gamey stuff that you would see on like a Whose Line Is It Anyway? And then we also learned long form improv, which is more like you improvising a play or improvising scenes, less of those games and types of things. I fell in love with improv, in love with it. By my junior year, I already knew that I wanted to move to New York and do comedy. I already had a plan in my head because through my college improv group, I had known a number of people who had graduated and gone on to New York and joined the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, which was like at that point, the huge improv theater in New York. So through my time in my college improv team, falling in love with improv, as a team, we made trips to Chicago. We made trips to New York to see like real professionals. And through all of this, I was just falling more and more deeply in love with comedy. I started listening to a bunch of different comedy podcasts. And I would say that by the end of my senior year, I was like beside myself to get to New York. I packed up all of my stuff literally the day of graduation. I packed up all of my stuff and drove it up to New York City. I already had an apartment. I was ready to go. I was just so in love with the world of it. And comedy made me feel a way that even like being in the plays in high school, nothing had ever made me feel the way comedy made me feel. And I wanted to take a chance at pursuing that. My parents were also really, really supportive of me. My dad is an artist, so I think they were a little bit more understanding of this idea of trying to do something like this. So with all of that, I graduated from the University of Delaware with my degree in international relations and Spanish. And I headed to New York, where I immediately became famous and am now extremely wealthy. No, that's not quite what happened. I moved to New York and I started hustling. I was doing shows in the back of a bar. This is a show that I ran with my dear friend Pat for years. We made $0. It had one weird red light. Sometimes the ceiling would drip down. During one of the shows, the projector actually fell from the ceiling and almost injured one of our audience members. It was a real place. And I worked as a camp counselor, also with my friend Pat. No, we're not dating. Everyone asks me if we're dating. We've never been dating. I was also a camp counselor at a camp on Staten Island where I had to wake up at 6:00 in the morning and drive to Staten Island with a bunch of kids. So crazy. I was doing shows until I would saying yes to every show. I would be in the city until 11 with a show at 11 p.m. that ended at 1 and come home. I was hustling. And I think that a really important decision that I made during this time was that in addition to my pursuit at UCB, which what that looked like is basically you take a core curriculum of classes, then you get transfer. You're allowed to go into advanced study if you get passed. And once you are in the advanced classes, you're allowed to audition for teams. First, a Lloyd team, which is kind of like JV improv, and then a Herald team, which was my ultimate goal. So on the one hand, I was pursuing that, and I was pursuing that super aggressively, taking all these classes, etc. But on the other hand, I was putting up, as I said, my own shows with a friend of mine. And I also was starting my own improv teams outside of the UCB theater, submitting my friends and I who were on those teams We were submitting ourselves for festivals independent of the UCB theater. We were making our own comedy videos. We were doing a lot of stuff independently without any recognition for a long time before the fruits of that labor started really getting seen. And I think, I think that this was a really key part of my development, and a lot of things that enabled me to succeed later was that I was okay with, performing shows for my friends in the back of a basement for a really, really long time. And I think a big part of my 20s and maybe people's 20s in general is this sort of frustrating lag between doing the work and knowing you're good and getting the actual recognition from whatever powers that be in your industry. There's always going to be a frustrating lag between those things. And it's kind of up to yourself to stay motivated and kind of remind yourself, okay, well, I love doing this and that's why I'm doing it. And without that, it's kind of hard to stick with it. I have a lot of friends who got to that point in their career and they were like, you know what, I'm done doing this. And I actually want to pursue something else, which is also fine. But that lag teaches you a lot about whether you are pursuing the right path or not, whether you really want to deal with that. So it's during this time that I sort of answered this question. What do I want to do with my life? I knew I wanted to be a comedian of some kind. That actually, as I would learn, that actually means a lot of different things. There are a lot of paths that come along with that. But generally, I knew I wanted to be a comedian. So now I had to answer the next fundamental question, which is, how do I do it? And it was through the process of putting up all of these shows, trial and error, different shows. I had one running monthly show with my friend Pat, but I had a bunch of different one-offs that I tried, themed stand-up shows, whatever, that just never took off and fell away. And it's fine. Open mics that I hosted for a month and whatnot. But eventually I would land on an idea that would actually really help my career in an immeasurable way. And that was the idea for the roast of your teenage self. So the way that this idea came to be is pretty simple. A guy that I was dating really pissed me off. He broke up with me. That was rude. I wasn't expecting him to do that. So I got pretty mad about that. And he was also a comedian. And so I decided, well, one way to get back at you would be to be a better comedian than you. So mission accomplished, by the way. So one day I was sitting at home, basically being sad about this boy, trying to think of things to do with my career, feeling just like all manner of 22 and lonely. And I was putzing around on my Facebook and I found an album of all my old MySpace photos, which for the youth of the nation was the social media platform that predated Facebook, and all MySpace photos kind of look like this. So this this is one of mine from that time. You can see the giant digital camera I mentioned from before. I'm wearing 17 shirts, 2 belts, 100 necklaces. It's a real fashion moment. I will say that the reason I'm wearing 2 belts, I did have a reason, and that was because a cool older girl at my high school was known for wearing 2 belts, and then she graduated, and I said, well, somebody's got to be wearing 2 belts. So that's how that came to be. So anyway, I found this treasure trove of old MySpace photos. They all looked like this. My comedic sensibility kicked in immediately, and I thought, what is the funniest way for me to put these on display, and how do I turn it into a show? Because that was my big thing, was like self-producing comedy shows for myself. And then I would book other cool people and we would get a crowd and etc. That's how that would work. So that was how I came up with the idea for the roast of your teenage self. At that time, it was called the roast of your 15-year-old self. And I remember I posted a Facebook status saying, if I did a show like this, would anyone come? And it got like really a bunch of likes and all that stuff. So in 2014, I put up the first Roast of Your Teenage Self in the back of that bar, not expecting anything. And it just, a ton of people showed up, and it just really took off from that moment. And I started to have all of these comedians that I really respected writing to me saying, like, I love this idea. Can I do the show, etc. So I was able to move the show from being in the back of a bar. I moved it to an official theater that used to be, it's no longer with us, but it's called the Annoyance Theater. So I moved the show up to the Annoyance. That was kind of one more bump up in credibility. Now it was like affiliated with this theater. The Annoyance goes under. Then I start realizing, oh, I can actually, people were paying money to see it at the Annoyance. So that at that point, I started booking larger venues. And again, this was stuff I was doing all on my own. Nobody was reaching out to me to try to get my show anywhere. I would just hit up a venue that I liked and try to make a deal with them for the door. And it worked. And slowly but surely, I was able to play larger and larger venues until I was doing the show at Caroline's on Broadway, which is a really amazing long-term prestigious venue, something that a place I never thought that I would be performing. And I was able to tour the show up and down the East Coast. And again, that was something that I just organized myself. I booked all of the comedians. I would go online, research local comedians, book a mixture of friends of mine from New York that had ties to the area and people who were local. I would look up the venue. I would book my whole transportation. It was all me. I never had no one in the industry was coming to me offering to be my booking agent or to really help me in any way until they were. So we're talking, the show started in 2014. It was in 2017 that I first got a manager. I got representation, which I got through him coming to see my shows at the UCB. And then through him, he was able to link me up with the New York Comedy Festival. And it was sort of at that point, 3 years down the line, that even the hints of industry or professional acclaim started coming to the show. Then it would be another 2 years down the line that we would link up with Evan Shapiro, who's been wonderful, National Lampoon, and then again, and now All Things Comedy, which is my podcast network, to not only go back to the New York Comedy Festival, but to also start producing this podcast with them, where I've been able to get way higher level guests than I would ever get on my little own self. So that was kind of the journey of that show. And, the big thing that I would say, or the takeaway from that entire thing, is that there were so many years of me doing every single thing on my own, of no one caring about this show before anyone cared. And I always knew that it was a good idea. And I always, I not only knew that it was a good idea, but it was something that I really genuinely enjoyed doing. And it brought me actual joy to put this show on every month and to see people's photos and to roast myself and to have people come up to me after the show and say that it meant something to them or was cathartic to them. That was a really meaningful experience. And I think that is what fueled me through all the time where I was like, ugh, no one came to this one. I don't want to do it anymore. Or I'm sick of having to book this every month. Or I'm sick of having to pay for my own transportation. It was the love of the game, I guess, that kept me from quitting during those times. So that's sort of my journey, but this is about you. So you guys are probably thinking okay, Elise, that's wonderful that you are a comedian. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. So here are my takeaways from my journey. What it will. You probably already know what you want to do with your life. And I don't mean that in the sense of what you're doing now is it. I mean, think about when you were a kid. I was obviously a very fashionable child. Maybe, I'm not saying that what you wanted to be when you were a little kid is what what you're going to be. It's a little more abstract than that. When I was a little kid, I never said, oh, I want to be an actor. That's what I want to do. But I did host a Grease themed birthday party where I made all of my friends sing backup to me as I performed the song for all of the parents. So clearly there was a kernel of the need to perform, maybe some mental illness in there, but that's what I was up to. I would take my parents' camcorder and I would record Amanda Bynes monologues from all that in my bedroom. Not because I was trying to get famous, but because I just felt compelled to do that because that's what brought me joy. And I never once said to anyone, oh, I want to be a writer. I'm going to write a newsletter, or I'm going to write for TV, or I'm going to write characters. But when I was in high school, I wrote, you guessed it, Harry Potter fan fiction. I will read this to you. It is incredibly embarrassing. This is an excerpt from a fan fiction that I wrote that was just the plot of Order of the Phoenix, but I was there and everyone wanted to be my boyfriend. So really interesting place to take the series. Hermione's eyes were so hurt, thoughtful, but hurt. I had always admired Hermione. She was a strong woman. She was determined, smart, never used her sexuality to get what she wanted. She was prettier than most people gave her credit for. I was surprised. More boys hadn't noticed her the way they had all noticed me. That's what I was right. My grades were bad at this time. I just want to point out that I should have been studying math, but instead I was writing myself into the Harry Potter books as a hot, popular girl. So really good use of my time ultimately, because now I am a comedy writer. So boo to anyone who says I was wasting my time. So anyway, the point of this is that, it's not a one-to-one comparison. But as much as I joke about not using my degree, another major cornerstone of my career has been political comedy with the Betches Sup newsletter and the Betches Sup podcast, which are all informed by not just my education, but the fact that when I was in high school, I was really into politics and I used to volunteer on campaigns and stuff. So I would really encourage you to think about the things that energized you when you were younger, before career concerns or imposter syndrome or comparison clouded everything, and see if maybe your past self has some clues for your future self. Again, it's not going to be a one-to-one comparison, but if you were a kid who loved soccer, maybe working for an athletics company you would find fun in that, or maybe working for a children's athletics program, you would find joy in that. If you were an avid reader, finding a job where you read a bunch could help you. It's just really going back and trying to remember the person that you were before the world started to tell you who you were and what brought you joy then. So that is my first bit of life advice here. My second bit is a very, I'm not the person who came up with this, but follow the fun. So I have done a lot of different things in my career that I never would have thought about ever doing. And like I said, I moved to New York to do improv. I wanted to be a successful improv comedian. But by following the avenues that I found the most fruitful, by being like, you know what, I am going to do stand-up. I am going to write sketches. I am going to write characters. And just allowing myself to be open to new opportunities, I've done a lot of different stuff. These are some characters. This is Lila on Virtue Signal. This is AOC. These are some characters that I've been able to do voiceover for. That was not something that was ever on my radar. And actually, when my manager sent me the audition for AOC, I was running around and I almost didn't send it back to him. I actually sent it back late because I was like, this show is never going to cast me. I don't do voiceover. But I did it. And out of nowhere, I got cast. And it turns out that the production company that did this show was making a new show. And now I'm on that show. So because I almost self-sabotaged myself out of a whole chain of career events, because this is also this work on Cartoon President and Tuning Out the News is how I got a voiceover manager. And now I get sent voiceover auditions. And there's so much that came from the fact that I did send in my audition that day instead of talking myself out of it, that like it has really helped me it has reminded me not to talk myself out of other things in the future. As far as the Betches Sup, I started working with that company years ago because I just thought they had a funny website and they needed writers and I needed a gig. So I started writing for them, and I ended up pitching a lot of political articles to them and they liked it. And when they wanted to start a political newsletter, they came to me, and that eventually led to a full-time job, which I eventually left the office full-time, but still work on the newsletter and still do the podcast. So it's become like an incredible partnership just because I sent in the freelancer application that day. This actually in the corner is a really fun project I worked on last year. I wrote a puzzle book, an adult puzzle book, which came out of, I just got a very weird email. It honestly looked like a phishing scam. But there was something about it that intrigued me. So I dug in a little bit more, found out that it was not, in fact, a phishing scam, that it was a real email, and ended up being contracted to write this book, which was something that just came out of nowhere. And again, I in this corner here, I did the audiobook for this new book that's actually coming out this week, Notes from the Bathroom Line. I also contributed a piece to it, but I ended up being able to record the audiobook and all of that stuff. That's just stuff that I wasn't even aware of as a potential career path. Like when I came to New York to be a comedian, I knew about doing improv and doing stand-up, and that was it, or being an actor. And now, just because I've let myself be open to different things and I say yes to opportunities that I think are intriguing, it's really, it's kept me working. It's kept me happy. It's kept me sane. And, that's really the best you can ask for in the entertainment industry, for sure. So what do I want to do with my life? One way you can answer that question is to follow the fun. But the other side of that, the flip side of that coin, is one of my favorite sayings. It's a Faulkner quote. It's "kill your darlings." And the idea of this quote is sometimes it's usually a quote used about writing, which is like, sometimes you have to cut your favorite line and you should do it because it doesn't serve the purpose. Or sometimes you have to cut things out or trim things back that are tough, but are ultimately going to get you where you need to be. So sometimes you need to kill your darlings. And the place where I really learned this in my life was with my relationship with UCB. So as you all remember, this charming young woman and my friend Tyler. Hi, Tyler. This charming young woman moved to New York right after graduation to pursue improv at the UCB Theater. And like I said, what that meant in my mind was getting to Herald Night. And I made it to Lloyd Night. So I was one step away. But at that point in my career, things with the roast had really started taking off. I was working full time at Betches. I was touring my show. I was starting to audition for parts on shows and whatnot more. And I was starting to realize that I had gotten what I was going to get out of my pursuit of improv, and that other things were making me more excited. Like I was starting to dread going to improv practice. I was starting to be annoyed with the commitments, with the shows, etc. I found myself wishing all the time for just a couple extra hours a week to get things done. And the more I looked at it, the more it really didn't make sense for me to keep being on a UCB team with the commitments that it was and with where I wanted to go. But it was really, really hard for me to actually make that choice to step down from my team and to end my formal relationship with the theater. Like, I still did shows there and all of that stuff, but there was a huge commitment to being on an actual team with the theater. And this felt like a really pivotal moment in my career, because I had never in the past had to like recalibrate a dream. Like, I had set this goal of going to Herald Night, and there was something in me that was just had a really hard time saying, it felt like I was quitting, basically. Like, I was quitting and I was giving up on this goal, when in reality, I was just recalibrating it. And that original goal no longer served its purpose. So I eventually did send an email to step down from the team. I actually think I ended up staying probably a year longer than I meant to. I wanted to, just because I was like agonizing over the decision. And it was one of those feelings where as soon as I sent the email and it was done, it was immediate relief. And I absolutely did need that time back. I absolutely did need to focus on those other things. It was right. And I needed to kill my darlings. So that is sort of the conclusion of my presentation. That's my journey. My best advice to you is to keep yourself open to new things, even if that new thing is quitting, even if that new thing is saying, oh, I actually don't want to do this anymore. That's also a way to serve yourself. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'll open it up to questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Elise. That was terrific.
Thank you. I hope it was fun for you guys.
It was a lot of fun. Before I ask any big questions, what would you have rather, see all our faces, or do you like speaking to a blank screen with just Dolly's face?
You know, it really goes back and forth. I feel it's nice when I can see people smiling, so that I know if I'm actually being funny or not. So I think the best would be to hear people laughing. Like, if people kept their mic on but camera off, so that I knew that I was entertaining everyone to the best of my ability.
Great. Well, I'm wondering, how do you write your comedy? Do you have a disciplined approach where certain hours of the day you do it, or does it just kind of spontaneously happen as you live your life? That's one question. And then, how do you do comedy on Zoom? If someone wanted to start being a stand-up comedy, do they have improv on Zoom? How do you start it to just see if you'd like it?
Absolutely. Okay. First question. I have started recently adding more discipline to my writing routine, but for the most part, it kind of happens in moments when I feel inspired. And a lot of times I do try to set deadlines for myself. I have a friend that I'm working on a script with right now, and we've set up like a standing Sunday meeting just to hold ourselves accountable for the pages that we want to get done. So now this year I try to set aside 2 hours a week that I just think of as like a creative block where I can work on kind of anything. And I have been finding that really useful, and it has helped me to work on stuff that I maybe would have kept procrastinating aside because they weren't urgent. So I can't say that I've always used the creative block, but I do recommend the creative block. I've found it useful this year. To your second question, there are a lot of comedy schools that are on Zoom right now. One that was actually started by former UCB alums that I really, really like and think are really, really talented is called Squirrel Comedy, squirrel like the animal. And they have classes on everything on Zoom all week. So improv classes, stand-up, all of that stuff. There's nothing like the actual energy of doing a live show. And I miss very much being able to do live performance. but comedians and improvisers are nothing if not adaptable. And there's actually a lot of really cool stuff that's happening digitally with comedy that's happening over Zoom. So I definitely recommend checking that out. And yeah, Squirrel Comedy is the one that I would recommend checking out as far as classes.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
No problem. Thank you. Anybody else have a question? It's totally fine if you don't. I know I covered everything so thoroughly that there's no way you could have a question.
I'm curious when you were still finding your way at the beginning about these opportunities without anyone really showing you the ropes, how you did that. Was it just like a lot of independent research, or were you setting up meetings to talk with people who were in the industry?
So it was a lot of independent research. I mean, I would watch also what other people who I admired were doing. So one person who I always really looked up to is this comedian, Jo Firestone. She's so funny. And she was putting on really awesome, really creative live shows all on her own. And so seeing her do that, I was kind of like, oh, it's doable. And I would take note if I saw other people working with a venue that seemed cool. I would write down and take note of that venue because I knew, okay, this venue is amenable to comedy shows. So part of it was like keeping my ear to the ground, staying up to date on just like what my peers are up to, what's going on. And then other parts were independent research. So, if I was trying to go to a city with the roast, I would Google around, see what other like Google stand-up shows in the area and see like where people were going for them. And then I sent a lot of cold emails, just hoping, someone would get back, and you send enough and eventually they do. So yeah, it was a combination of like independent research and watching what other people were doing.
Great.
Yeah.
And I had another question about, I know you like trusted your gut, but then you also spoke a little bit about getting feedback from people in terms of the roast to your teenage self. But I'm curious how more so, other than like doing a bit of outreach, like, hey, like how you said on Facebook, like, hey, would anyone be into this? How you kind of maintain, like judge. I don't know. Sorry, this is a really long question.
No, it's okay.
I guess I'm wondering about how we measure, like, I know it's about like following the fun and like what engages us, but then when it is like a pursuit that is pretty like audience heavy, or like, if there's a demand for it in terms of not just us getting excited about an idea, I guess, was it just like continual, like you would just like, you were going to keep, like, if it didn't become something that you could sustain you financially, were you just going to just keep going with it? And, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think I get what you're asking. So number one of the good things about comedy or the entertainment industry and pursuing that is in the live sense, it's a pretty immediate feedback zone. So people are either laughing or they're not. People are either, showing up to the shows or they're not. So with the roast, like not only were people laughing at the show, but people were showing up at a rate where I was like, okay, this like the reality is matching what I think in my head about this. I did not ever have a very reliable backup plan of any kind. So yeah, my plan was to just try to keep making it work in some capacity, no matter what. That's not to say that's the only way to do it. I have my writing partner, Katie Ruth Ashcraft. She's a really talented director, but her other gig is speech writing, and she writes speeches for politicians, and that helps her on the side. And like, she's able to direct what she wants because she has this speech writing gig that helps her on the side. So there are a lot of different paths to doing it.
Yeah. So then did you envision this as like a prototype? Like, I'm really excited about this. Let's see, like, let me just try it for a few months or something to see how it goes. Was it like a prototype, or was it like I'm going to do this like from the jump?
It was, I was just really jazzed on putting on new shows at that time. And the response that I had gotten on Facebook to the idea had been so much that I had a feeling when I started, like, oh, this could be my new monthly thing if it goes well. Cause that was kind of the way people were running shows at that time, is they were doing them monthly. So I was like, oh, this could be if this goes well, this could be my solo monthly show. And it went well. So I did make it my solo monthly show.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody else? If not, it's also fine.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that now you're going to be featured on Paramount Plus when it comes out. So I was just wondering, like, at what point did people start reaching out to you versus you reaching out to other people that you mentioned, like, early in your career? Like, how did you know that you were there?
Once I got representation, that was kind of the time where I felt like, okay, now I've joined, for better or worse of a term, the industry. And it's at that point where other people started getting involved in the decision making of things. And I wasn't just putting up shows to make my friends laugh. I was putting up like professional products to try to get jobs. So that was like a huge shift career-wise, that like it was noticeable. It was something that like, it was a difficult transition because it's really, really exciting once you get to that point in your career where like people who are known start to know about you or want to meet with you or want to read what you have to write. But it can take some of the fun and like on the fly aspects of things out of it, because now you're doing things for the approval of other industry people and not just to make your friends laugh on a Friday night.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And did that mean then that the partners you were working with at that point, or your clients, had a different, like a more rigorous process for feedback?
Sometimes, yeah, you really do go from a point where it's like you're just doing your stuff and the public is coming to your shows and friends are coming to your shows, but it's all pretty like positive feedback to, you know, sending someone a script and having them be like, it's not good, or this isn't what we're looking for, or we want you to change this part that is actually something that you love about the script. So it is a really interesting point in your career when you have to start inviting the next level in, and you have to start inviting in that feedback.
Do you have, sorry if someone else has a question.
No.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, comedy is such, like, the way you speak about comedy, it's like, wow, you really love it, because from everything that I've heard from people, it's like, it's also dealing with a lot of rejection. So I'm kind of wondering if there were any experiences with like you growing up, or like in different jobs, or like experiences that you had that helped better prepare you for that rejection, or was it like a mindset thing where you were like, yes, this just like helps my practice?
I mean, the rejection parts of it are, it is hard. It's a cliche, but it's like a million no's all the time. And that is a difficult part to once you like get into the industry, because before that, you're really living in a world of yes. You're just showing up to your shows, people are laughing, etc. Then once you start actually auditioning, that's when those no's come in and it starts, it hurts, you know? Wait, I've lost my train. Remind me of your full question again.
What? It was just,
I just started waxing poetic.
If any experiences from like your jobs or others like helped prepare you for the yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. Yes. I think that being a weird emo teen helped prepare me for rejection. Certainly. My dad is also an artist, so I know I've seen that like he didn't always work jobs that he loved. And sometimes he would get rejected from things for when he sent his paintings in, or sometimes he didn't sell things. So I think sort of subconsciously, I went into pursuing an artistic path with a little bit more of an understanding of like what that actually means.
So then it didn't hit you as hard, but like when it hit you, were there certain things that like a certain mindset or like certain kind of ways to cope with that you found?
Yeah. I mean, there have definitely been some tough rejections that have hurt. I think the thing that has helped me is that background of always having self-produced projects that I am able to put forward and that I am working on. So, you know, the roast is mine and I'm always going to have that. So if an audition goes badly and I get rejected and it's sad, that sucks, but I still have this project that's mine that means a lot to me. Or, you know, if someone, I don't know, if the roast has an episode that gets bad reviews or something, I don't know. That's actually never happened, but let's
You're like, I'm just too good. I don't know. I'm having trouble reading.
But if that were to happen, I have this script that I'm really excited about that I'm working on with a friend. So I think also you never really want to put your eggs all in one basket for all the reasons that they say, but it also helps. It helps that rejection on one project isn't going to mean rejection of everything. Like that's one rejection and that sucks, but I've still got all this other stuff going on that keeps me going.
Yeah. No, thanks.
Should we wrap it up? Does anyone have any more questions? I can stop my screen share at this point.
Did you ever meet that ex that you were going to show? Like show him love?
Listen, that's a story for another presentation. But let's just say I got what I wanted out of that. He's no longer in the industry, so that's fine. All right. Well, this was so much fun, you guys. It was really a joy to talk to you. And you can find me on socials. I'm at Pandalise on Instagram and at Elise Navidad on Twitter. If you ever have a question or anything, I do check my DMs on occasion. So I would be happy to answer any more if something pops up.
Thank you very much.
Anytime. Thank you, guys.